I'm Sean Paul of Intrigue Journal, and this is a story that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. The White House is probably the most notable building in all of America, but did you know it is credibly known to be one of the most haunted buildings in our country? Journal, and this is a story that I've been wanting to pursue for quite some time and interview a man that is truly unique regarding this topic. And he's probably the only person that has been allowed to go into the White House and investigate whether or not it's really haunted. His name is Jeff Belanger, and he wrote Who's Haunting the White House? You can get that book on Audible. I spoke with him for 40 minutes, and his accounts and his stories and his deductions are amazing, and I hope you enjoy them. Well, thank you so much for making some time. Your book is currently available on Amazon for $125.
Is it really?
Yeah, 4 listings. You can either get it used for $2.50 or you can get it brand new for $125.
You can get it for $5 on Audible. It's an audiobook, and we put it out this past spring with voice actors and things like that. So Audible or iTunes, it's like $5.
Okay, all right. And then you're benefiting from that as it's being sold now, or did you just get some huge advance?
No, I get a royalty off of that. If you pay $125, I probably get nothing because that's an out version. But that's amazing. I mean, I guess I'm sitting on a small fortune in my basement. That's awesome.
Oh, because you've got hard currency in your basement as far as copies of that book?
I've got like 5, so I guess sitting on a plane ticket somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
So with the Audible version, it looks like it's less geared. It's being packaged more as a book for adults and not for kids, right?
Yeah, I mean, even when the kids book came out, the whole idea was like, I always said like 10 and up. Plenty of adults enjoyed it. It's full of great pictures, historic photographs, stories, firsthand accounts, and things like that. And so that was the whole idea. But the way I got into the White House, I called the main number years ago. And first of all, the story, I'd already included it in my first book, The World's Most Haunted Places. It was a chapter. And I just couldn't stop thinking about the White House because I love the credibility of so many of the different witnesses. And so I kept thinking about it, and I said, this is a bigger project than just a chapter. And I called the White House, and this was probably 2006, the first time. And I just called the main number because what else do you do?
Wow.
And within, I said, hey, I want to do a book about the ghosts of the White House. And they said, hold on a minute. And within like 30 seconds, I was on the phone with the boss, who is the chief usher at the time was Gary Walters. And he'd served every president since Nixon and was currently the chief usher. And he's the boss because about 100 employees of the White House report to him. And it doesn't matter which political party's in power. These are the cooks, the cleaning crew, the butlers, the people that take care of this house and museum and run this place. And they stay there, before presidents and stay after and so on. And I said, hey, I want to do a book about the ghosts of the White House. And he said, yeah, we're not interested. And I said, but wait, I think we can use the ghost as an innovative way to teach history to kids because you can't know who a ghost is if you don't know who a person was. And he said, go on. And we talked for a little bit, and with some help from my congressman, a couple of background checks, I got to actually go down there, interview him, interview some of the staff, get a tour, get a little bit behind the scenes of the White House. And it was amazing, amazing experience.
That's fantastic. Now, what also is amazing is if they were not going to let you in, that means that they're not going to let most paranormal investigators in there. So you were able to work the system by coming at it from an educational standpoint, rather than just, we want to bring in our EMF readers and our Ouija boards and come into the White House. They get shut down right away.
The only one I know of that went into the White House with a Ouija board would have been Jimmy Carter's daughter. That's a story I'd read, that she had held a seance in the Lincoln bedroom with some of her friends. But she had the advantage of being in the first family, which I definitely do not have that advantage.
So that's as close to another paranormal investigator entering the White House. So basically you're it in recent times.
That's been it. And I know because I work for the show Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel as doing locations and history. And we've tried and tried. And there's just no way. They're not going to allow it. They're not going to allow it for TV unless it's an invite of the president or first family, a personal invite. It's just not going to happen.
Wow. Okay. So then I'll try and get through this as quickly as possible. But I just want to say this again. You are probably one of the only paranormal investigator that got in to actually speak to these people. Full disclosure, not doing anything, sneaky. You
Yeah,
got the invite. You were allowed in.
I'm not aware of any other paranormal investigator that's ever been allowed in. And I was allowed in because I'm a writer and an author and working on a book that I'm really proud of. I mean, that book sold out twice, and including a revised edition. I
Right.
sent it to Gary Walters when it was done. I sent it to President Bush when it came out, and he wrote me a letter back. I have a signed letter saying congratulations on the publication of your book. I'm like, this is awesome.
Which
So
Bush
yeah,
was it?
sorry,
Which Bush president was it?
second Bush. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it was George W. Bush.
Okay.
And I sent it to Obama as well, but I never heard back.
Okay.
I guess he was busy moving in.
I suppose. Now, what about? I heard on one of your interviews, as I was preparing for this, that you did a request Freedom of Information Act to get something declassified with the senior Bush president.
I did. So when I was working on this, there are presidential libraries for pretty much all the modern day presidents, going back to, gosh, at least 1930s or 40s. Every president now has a presidential library that has every document ever in their White House stored there. As an American citizen, you are allowed to call them, use it for research or whatever. So I contacted all the presidential libraries looking for any references to ghosts, spirits, or whatever at the White House, and I found a treasure trove. But with the George H.W. Bush, the first Bush, the senior Bush, they said there's two documents here, but they're classified, and would you like to file a Freedom of Information Act? And I said, well, yes, of course I would. And then I forgot about it because you don't wait on these things. You just keep doing research, finding everything you can. The book came out, it was published, and then probably 6 months later, after the book came out, I got a letter in the mail from the George H.W. Bush Library saying that they declassified one of them. And the letter was a handwritten note from the president to David McCullough, the author that writes all those great thick history books like John Adams and things like that. And it said, paraphrasing, either the White House really is haunted or the thunderous applause from your lecture last night is still reverberating throughout the building. Thank you so much for coming here and giving a talk on history. And I felt really dirty after that. And I went, oh, this was just a private note between two people thanking him. And it was really none of my business, none of our business, but it was, and for some insane reason, that was classified, and now, thanks to me, has been declassified. So there it is.
But did you get the impression that there is kind of a widely accepted understanding, or they accept the fact that it's haunted within the staff and the administrations?
Absolutely. Every president has had some sort of president and first family member has made some sort of comment about acknowledging that they've heard it's haunted. Hillary Clinton talked about it on a night show, saying, "Oh, it gets spooky at night." The Obama children, talked about it. It's every single administration knows it. There's no way you can move into that building and not know the haunted legacy, because it goes back for 60, 70 years, people have been actively talking about it, but I found documentation going all the way back to really the very first few years of the 1900s, as far as it being haunted. And so I don't believe it's possible for any administration, any president, to move in with his or her family and not know that at least has a reputation.
Right. You've got presidents that are acknowledging it, and then the staff members are very professional, heavily vetted. They're not people that, say crazy things. They have to be the highest level of professional. Right?
So the presidents, one of the things that I thought was really fun was, his name jumped out of my head for a second. So President Harry S. Truman wrote about the ghosts of the White House in like 6 different letters to his wife. Personal letters that are all available to all of us, and I was able to get some scans of the originals, where he talked about hearing footsteps, and he knew he was alone on the second floor. And the way the White House works is the first floor is a museum, and it's where the Secret Service stay and so on. But the second floor is private, and everyone there works really hard to make sure that if the president and the first family are up there, that they have their privacy, and that they're not bothered in any way unless they ask for help. So President Truman is up there sleeping, and he knows he happens to be alone up there, and he hears footsteps. So he goes downstairs in the middle of the night to find the Secret Service standing where he's supposed to be, and says, "What are you doing upstairs?" And they said, "Sir, no one's up there. That's not us." And he kept writing about it. And to quote the president, he said, "Sure as shooting, the place is haunted." And he pictured like people from the past just walking around up there and kind of tuning into it. So, of course, the White House was also getting pretty run down by that time, and that was also the era in which they completely gutted the building and redid it entirely, going down several stories to build bunkers and other rooms, expanding the east and west wings, and doing all kinds of things. But that building has got such a storied history, and you can't tell the story of America without also telling the story of the White House, because it has seen and done it all, including it's been attacked, arguably twice. You know, I mean, it was attacked in the War of 1812 when it was burned to the ground, just nothing but an empty shell, an empty burnt shell. And then, you know, it was a target on September 11th, 2001.
Right.
It was one of the targets, but it fortunately it never materialized. So this building has, you know, every decision that has shaped our country, so many of them have been made in and around this building, from the very earliest days to present day. And you feel that when you walk inside. And Sean, have you ever been there as a kid, a tourist, or anything?
No, I have not. Yeah.
I went as a kid, and then going again was amazing. Back when I was working on this book, when you walk into that building, I mean, you know, you pull out a $20 bill, you know, and go, oh, you know, this is a famous building. And you walk in and there's the North Portico, and you think every single president in U.S. history stood where I'm standing right now.
Wow.
And that's a powerful feeling. I know Washington died before the building was complete, but still he laid the cornerstone. He approved the plans. He was there.
Wow.
Every president stood there. You walk through the halls, you see these historic paintings that are world famous now, chairs that presidents long dead once sat in. The building just oozes this history. And stationed throughout it, you've got these Secret Service agents, and you've got these people that work there, and they are so steeped in the history. They know everything. I mean, the Secret Service agent I was talking to, someone would say, well, how old is this chair? And he said, well, it was made in Roanoke, Virginia in 1787, and the desk was brought in by this president and that. I mean, he knew everything. The pen, the carpet was brought in by the Clintons. They just thought it needed updating. And I said, well, what do you know about the ghost of the White House? And he said, well, we've heard about a British redcoat that's been seen out near the North Portico, and President Abraham Lincoln has been experienced pretty much throughout the building. And he said it in the very same tone of voice where he talked about the chair, the desk, the rug. And I was just like, wow, I mean, is this like federal recognition of the existence of ghosts? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about, but this is what people talk about here. And I thought that was just pretty neat, that it was that matter of fact, that well known, that I didn't even get a cockeyed look. He just continued talking, you know, same tone of voice. And that's the way they are there. They're not there to judge what it means, just to say that this is what it is.
That's fantastic. So when the building was gutted by Truman and rebuilt on the inside, a photographer came in and took that infamous picture.
Yeah.
Now, they were faking photographs back when Lincoln was president, and
Sure.
Houdini exposed it and proved that, because he had somebody make a picture of him with, you know, including Lincoln in the picture, and he was proving that, you know, these pictures of ghosts can easily be faked. However, that picture was taken by Abby Rowe, which was a photographer that worked for 4 administrations.
Right. So Abby Rowe is the official White House photographer. And just like today, his job was to document everything, just get, you know, absolutely everything they could. And this was a historic moment, the White House gutted and being rebuilt and refurbished. So Abby Rowe is taking these pictures. And it wasn't until really decades later that someone suggested ghost. No one said it at the time. It's just people are looking through these old photos and suddenly went, whoa, what is that? And if you look at the photo, it's the inside of the White House, and you see like earth movers and so on. And way in the back in the right corner, down low, you see this guy that's sort of semi-transparent, see-through, and you see the wall behind him. And you could say, well, he's so far away, and the cameras back then weren't exactly like cameras now. And that's absolutely true. But if you look to the left of that ghostly figure, you see 3 men who are clearly dressed in like shirts, ties, and so on, standing there. And they are just the same distance as this figure, and yet they appear totally solid. You know, clearly those are 3 living men, and this other figure is sort of see-through. So I don't know, I wasn't there at the time. However, it's a very curious photo because we can't really explain it. And so Abbey Road's definitely not a paranormal investigator, like you said, the official White House photographer. And yet this picture makes us kind of scratch our heads during a time when that building was getting a whole nother life.
And people are speculating that it could be Lincoln.
Oh, the speculation as to who that ghost is, I've never heard anyone put any name on it. But one of the things that happens with haunted places is that anything that bumps in the night gets attributed to the most famous person that ever even visited the place. So, for example, if you go down like through Virginia, there's all these historic bed and breakfasts, and a lot of them have a plaque that say George Washington slept here. You know, it's like a big deal. It's a big badge of honor for those buildings, and a lot of them, being so old, have haunted reputations. And of course, every one of them is haunted by George Washington. You know, and you're just like,
course, yeah,
right. You stayed here one night. Right, but he stayed here one night back in 1765, and his spirit is forever here. And the reason is because that's a lot more interesting story than it's a gardener who fell off the roof in 1938, or whatever. Plus, by giving a name to these things that bump in the night, we get this kind of false sense of control. Not to say, that Washington could be hunting wherever he damn well pleases, I guess. But there's a difference between hearing a knock and saying that's George Washington and seeing an apparition that you recognize from the money in your wallet. That's a whole other experience.
And there are accounts of people having seen Lincoln in the White House.
To me, the most credible account I heard was from a White House foreman named Tony Savoy, whose job was to go up early in the morning and turn on the lights on the second floor, which is the living area of the White House for the first family. And he said he was walking down the hall, he turned the lights on, he turned the corner, and there was Abraham Lincoln sitting right outside of the Lincoln bedroom with his legs crossed and his hands resting on him. He mentioned 3-button spats on his shoes. He turned to look at him, they look at each other, and then he vanishes. And he goes downstairs and he told the assistant usher what he had just seen, and he was told, "You're just one of many people that has seen and experienced President Lincoln over the years." It's important to note that the Lincoln bedroom was never Lincoln's bedroom. That used to be the executive office. This was long before the East and West Wings. So where the Lincoln bedroom is now used to be the president's office. And that story gets repeated. And again, it's Lincoln. We know what he looks like. He's unmistakable.
He also died while he was in office.
Right.
His family was deeply engaged in the spiritual movement. His wife was having seances at the White House. I've heard that he participated in those seances.
So the Lincoln presidency, hands down, is the most difficult presidency of any of them. There's not even a close second, because Lincoln's son, Willie, died while they were in the White House, inside the White House. He died of a typhoid-like disease, and the family was completely broken up by that. That family, if you read all the accounts, really got along. They really loved each other. He was crazy about his kids, enjoyed his family as much as one job. So that really broke him up. And really, Mary Todd Lincoln was completely distraught over it. As you mentioned, she was holding seances. She was more into it than he was, but we know the president attended at least one or two because he kind of paid a political price for it in the papers, saying, "What's this president doing attending seances?" But I think if anyone has ever lost a child, I think you got to forgive anyone for what that horror must be like. So you've got that. And then, of course, you've got the nation completely divided, unlike today, in war. I mean, they're brother against brother, state against state. So thousands upon thousands are dying every day from the Civil War. And then Lincoln, of course, pays the ultimate price. He's assassinated while in office. No presidency, none, is even close to that as far as how difficult it must have been, how much the strain of the job must have been between losing a child, potentially losing a country, and then losing your life. No way. That is the benchmark.
Very tortured presidency.
We measure all others. And I believe that people of the White House today almost summon his presence, his spirit, if you will. I saw an interview with George H.W. Bush, the senior, who had said it was one of his first couple of weeks in office, and he had to send some troops into harm's way. Some minor skirmish, but still, troops were going to be put into harm's way. And he was really struggling with the decision. And then he said, I thought about what Lincoln went through. And I went, okay, if he got through that, I can get through this. And I almost feel like in just even thinking about him in that way, you are summoning him. You're saying, please, President Lincoln, be near me right now. I need your wisdom, your presence. I need to know how bad it can get, and that I too can get through this. And anyone who understands and appreciates history and studies history, I think reveres what Lincoln went through, reveres what that time must have been like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've heard so many presidents invoke that name ever since. I mean, going back decades, they all invoke Lincoln. He's transcended beyond just president. I mean, he's up there with Washington
Sure.
in our country as far as like just about like above us all, right? Just about into deity, is what we're talking about here, stopping just short of that. And I think every president understands that that is the benchmark, is how bad as it can get.
It's interesting. As you were running through all the challenges that he encountered, though, I was just thinking, who could be, if Donald Trump was to be visited by anybody, he probably, he has a lot in common with him, because the country now is more divided than it ever has been in my lifetime. And,
right.
He has a real rivalry with the media. And I heard that Abraham Lincoln had reporters arrested.
So one of the interesting things that's happened in our country throughout is that things seem to come to a head every half century or so. And Lincoln, of course, is the Civil War, and he's trying to control as much as he can. Newspapers are becoming a big deal around the 1860s. You have to remember, not everyone could read before the 1860s. The literacy rate in our country really started to climb after that. So newspapers are really kind of a new thing. If you can't read, a newspaper is irrelevant to you. So now this newspaper, these voices, these dissenting opinions are widely available. Yeah, this is new. And then if you fast forward, then you've got radio comes around. This is a whole new medium. And then fast forward again, and now television becomes the medium. And President Kennedy lost his life during that time. You had America divided then as well. So we've been divided, and it often gets stoked by great leaps in media. Newspapers with Lincoln, radio in the early 1900s, television with Kennedy, social media now.
So there you go. With radio came World War II.
Yeah.
With the media, or with TV, came Vietnam. Right. And so now you got the never-ending news cycle on cable news and the internet.
And what's different now is that so in the earliest days of newspapers, it was the wild, wild west. People said anything they wanted, and it was really the New York Times that became the paper of record. They became the benchmark for, no, we really want objective reporting. This was how journalism is supposed to work, instead of just making stuff up, which many publications did wildly in those early days. Suddenly the New York Times comes along in the latter half of the 1800s and says, no, we are going to be the journalistic benchmark. And then journalism gets to be a thing. Like, no, this is how we should all be. We should all be objective. We owe it to our readers. And some people, of course, fall short of that. Some people excel at it. And then they try to carry that into radio and then television. And then suddenly, now what we have today is that we're back in the Wild West of the 1850s and 60s, where back then, if anyone could afford a newspaper, then they could say whatever they want. Now just about everyone can afford internet connection, and on Twitter and Facebook and whatever, you can say anything you want, and it gets passed around and spread and shared. And the problem is that we have an awful lot of untrained journalists that are trying to act as pundits, as journalists, as editorialists, and we have just this cacophony of noise, and it's tough to know who to listen to. And so people end up listening to whoever they sort of already agree with. And anything that they say that sounds similar to how they feel sounds good to them. I don't need to look into it. And now we've got this rampant fake news going around where people are spreading stories on Twitter and Facebook without vetting it. And sometimes, and even when you call them out and you go, hey, that's not only is that impossible by physics or history or so on, here's some sources where you can look this up and verify that what you just said is completely not true, then the defense is always like, well, better safe than sorry. Better people should know that the spirit of this is that this person's bad or this party's bad and this one's good and trying to do the right thing, or vice versa. And so we have a time where no one's trained in this and no one knows who to listen to anymore.
That's fantastic. That's a great point. We've strayed away from ghost stories, but this can be just as frightening.
Well, sure. So the thing is, I study legends first. So to me, a legend is a thing that grows from something smaller. And though I'm a believer in ghosts and paranormal because I've had strange experiences and I've talked to so many people who have also had strange experiences, the legend is the thing that grows bigger than the original thing. We could each name a dozen athletes where you could say the legend of them is bigger. Michael Jordan in basketball, right? I mean, he's an icon.
Right.
He is. We may never see another Jordan that good, and that's intimidating to another player before you even take the court. You go, oh man, that's Jordan, and you haven't even started the game and he's already winning. And that's the power of a legend. And so the story is the thing that grows and grows and grows. And now when we've got people making up facts, making up statistics, or just skewing statistics to for whatever they feel, we're to a point now where people would rather believe the legend, whatever the legend is. This party's good, that party's the party of evil or oppression or whatever. They'd rather just believe the legend than believe the facts, because we've just been manipulated by numbers and data is just big and scary. And now let's just go with the legend as opposed to.
Well, yeah, I mean, and people's attention spans have never been shorter either, by the way. If you want to start giving them data. Exactly.
Okay. Sorry. No, you're right. Yeah, well, you're right. We have 140 character attention span, although I know Twitter has, I think, doubled that. But our attention span has gotten a lot shorter. And so I think for those of us that work in media, and I count myself among it, I do podcasts and I write books and I work in television. How can I tell you what's important as quickly as possible and leave you with something to ponder? And I'm lucky in that I work in folklore and legends, so I can hook you with the story. I'm not responsible for telling you an event that happened yesterday. I'm telling you about an event that happened decades ago or centuries ago, and how its effects can still ripple through today. I believe every legend, every ghost sticks around because we need it in some very tangible way, and in a way we may not fully understand just yet, but that's not up to us. A legend exists because we all contribute to it. It's not up to me whether a place is haunted or not. It's up to all of us. I didn't decide the White House was haunted. This is just a thing that we've all contributed to, that people have had experiences, that they've shared their stories, and then it makes it into print, it makes it into talk shows and so on, and it makes it into popular culture. And it's up to each of us individually to say, well, why would Lincoln keep sticking around? Is it out of duty and honor that he just loved his country so much that he's just never going to give that job up? Or is it because we need Lincoln? We need everything he represents to stick around, and presidents need him, and so on. Maybe he haunts us because we need him to haunt us. Please, President Lincoln, haunt us until you're no longer needed.
Wow. That's a great takeaway.